So this video is an introduction to ions, what exactly they are, what you're going to be learning and have to know, as well as the first couple groups of them. Okay, so I'm going to give you my ion speech that I give every year so that you really understand the importance of these. So first of all, you've learned that an ion is a charged particle, right? Something like Na+1, for example. Okay. Well, ions can also be a group of atoms that has a charge as well. So, for example, this is what you'll be learning. You'll be learning that the sodium ion is Na+1, right? It's always the same thing. And then, for example, you'll be learning things like phosphate. Okay, and phosphate is a group of ions, PO4, and the whole thing has a charge of -3. So in the beginning, we're just going to be learning these, memorizing them, okay? Although there are a lot of tricks, so there's not actually that many that you have to straight memorize. But you're going to need to know them. Why? Because we're going to get to a point where we start using them. For example, we're going to get to a chapter where you have to write formulas and name them. So I'll say sodium phosphate. And because of what their charges are, we balance them out. And this will be the formula for sodium phosphate. Okay, so that unit, obviously, if you don't know what the sodium ion is or you don't know what the phosphate ion is, you can't write sodium phosphate correctly. So you won't be able to do that unit at all. And then what we're going to do is we're going to start writing reactions. So it'll be like sodium phosphate reacts with potassium chloride. And so you're going to end up with something like this. So you're going to write the reaction because you'll know what sodium is and phosphate is, and you'll know what potassium is and chloride is. And you'll write your little reaction. Now, if you don't write the formulas correctly, because you didn't know your ions, well, then the reaction's going to be wrong. And then when we write a reaction, we then have to balance it. So a little of this, a little of that, that works, okay? But you're going to balance it wrong, or you won't be able to balance it all. It usually doesn't work if you have the reaction wrong because you have the formulas wrong because you didn't know your ions. And then we're going to get to what we call stoichiometry, which is one of my favorite things. And it's basically throwing math into this. So it'll be like 10 grams of sodium phosphate reacts with 5 grams of KCl. How many grams of potassium phosphate will be formed? And you're going to get that math wrong if your reaction's wrong, because your balancing was wrong, because your formulas were wrong, because you didn't know your ions. And then later in the year, we add even more to it, and we put gas laws into it. So it'll be, none of these are gases, but just pretending, it'll be like, 3.24 liters at 254 Kelvin and 105.2 kPa, right? And so you do these gas laws on top of the math that comes from the balancing, that came from the reaction, that came from the formulas, that came from the ions. So as you can see, these are pretty important because you won't be able to do this, and you won't be able to do this, and you won't be able to do this, and you won't be able to do this if you don't know what these are, okay? So what you need to do is, again, these need to be in your long-term memory, okay? And again, there are tricks, so you'll be able to use the tricks. But this can't be something that you just study 10 minutes before a quiz and write it down real quick. You have to really know them. Let me give you an example of long-term memory. When I was in 5th grade, I had to learn a list of the prepositions. And we didn't have a song, by the way. We had a straight list that we had to learn. And we were going to have a quiz where we were giving a blank piece of paper and we had to write the prepositions. Now, in 5th grade, this was serious business. And so I remember that my friends and I, we lived, ate, breathed, played prepositions, that list, for several days. I mean, we were jump roping on the playground to the prepositions list. Now, I have not studied that list since 5th grade, but I can still tell you about, above, across, after, against, among, around, at, before, beside, between, by, down, during, in, into, near, of, off, on, over, through, to, toward, under, up, with, without. It's just there. It's never leaving, okay? And that's what you want this to be. You want 10 years from now for you to read an article or hear something on the news and they say something about phosphate and you go PO4 minus 3. It just comes out, right? That's how well we need to know these, okay? What I usually tell kids is that you need to be on the boat. And what I mean by that, this is the SS ion. Okay, and you need to be pretty much the captain, right? There you are, got the steering wheel. Okay, you are driving the boat, right? You know your ions, okay? You do not want to be one of these people who sort of knows them, right? And so you're like hanging off the side of the boat, right? Because that will be very sad. You will also have extremely long arms, so you don't want to do that either. Or worse, you're not even like attached to the boat at all, right? Because then you might be eaten because there's this, the ion shark. Oh, this is one of the worst sharks I've ever... Okay, that looks more like an anaconda. Yeah, I'm going to need to work on my shark. Oh, wait, we need a fin. Yeah, that's really bad. I'm going to have to draw a new shark. But anyway, you don't want to get eaten by the ion shark, right? You want to be on the boat, happily, right? Knowing your ions. Okay? Okay, so let's begin. Okay, so the first group of ions is the positive elements with fixed charges. So by fixed, what we mean is that they're always the same thing. Some elements could have, +2 or +3, right? These ones are always the same, okay? So here's what they are. Group 1A is +1. Pretty easy, right? Group 2A is +2. There you go, right? And then we have, I like to call them the special 6. So we have carbon, which is +4, aluminum, which is +3, zinc, which is +2, and silver, which is +1, and then silicon is also +4, and cadmium is also +2. Okay, so I know what you're thinking, like, oh gosh, how am I going to remember these, right? God, I'm going to have to make flashcards. Not necessarily. let's take a look at your periodic table. But before we do that, there is one more positive ion that you're going to need to know, but it is not an element, okay? And this is ammonium. Okay, and ammonium is a polyatomic ion, which means, like phosphate we mentioned earlier, it has more than one element in it. So it is NH4 plus 1. Okay, I like to think New Hampshire for one and all, right? Okay, so that one you're just going to have to memorize. Okay. Okay, so you are going to get out your pretty new periodic table that I gave you, okay, and you're going to be writing on it. I know it's really pretty, but you'll need these on there to practice. Okay, so what you're going to do is we're going to start by above group 1A, you're going to put a plus 1. And above group 2A, you're going to put a plus 2. Now, those other 6, check this out. Carbon, aluminum, zinc, silver. They're all in a line. And look, plus 4, plus 3, plus 2, plus 1. See? And then silicon was under carbon, and that's also plus 4. And cadmium is under zinc, so that's also plus 2. My little table here is really small, so my charges are taking up the whole box. You can write them much smaller in the corner and not cover everything. Okay, so do that on your table. Just really nicely outline those 6. Put the charges in the corner of the box. Okay, so every time you look at your table, those 6 jump out at you. Okay, and you just have to remember, right? Carbon is like the essence of life, right? It's the backbone of all organic compounds, which came from something living. So that's where where it starts. Carbon, and then it goes down. 4, 3, 2, 1, or you can think of it as 4, 4, 3, 2, 2, 1, because silicon and cadmium are underneath. Okay. Okay, so now how do we name those? So the naming rule is the name of the element plus ion. Yeah, that's really difficult. Okay, so if I gave you Li plus 1, you're going to write lithium ion. Okay, now if I gave you silver ion, you'd say silver. Okay, where's that? And then you go, oh, it's one of the special 6. Here it is. It's plus 1. So Ag plus 1. Okay. And you will always have a periodic table in front of you. Always. I have laminated ones that look just like the one I handed out to you. And you'll get a marker. So once you get the table and you get your quiz or test, you can write in your tricks all over it to make it easier. Okay. Okay. Now, the second group, so to speak, is the positives that don't have fixed charges. So let's look at those. But first, before we forget, we need to write in ammonium. So I would say kind of write down here, and obviously write smaller than I am because your table is bigger. We just want to put ammonium, NH4 plus 1. Okay? And there are other ones that we're going to have to know later, and we'll be adding them into that space as well. Okay, so these are the positive elements with variable charge. So this means they're not always the same thing. Okay, So this makes it easier almost because there's nothing to know, okay? So the difference with these is I can't just say iron ion, for example, because I would look up iron, it's number 26, and it's not in group 1, it's not in group 2, and it's not one of the special 6, so I don't know what it is, okay? So what this means is that we have a different naming rule, okay? So the naming rule is the name of the element, like before, with charge in parentheses as a Roman numeral. Okay, so for example, if I said Fe plus 2, okay, so that would be called iron, Roman numeral 2, ion. Okay, and going the other way is even easier. If I gave you, I don't know, gold. Let's see, oops, that's not how you spell gold. Come on. Okay. Gold, 1 ion. Okay, well, gold symbol is AU, and it says 1, so plus 1. Okay, now the tricky part is that you have to know which is which, right? So if I give you K plus 1, okay, you have got to find where K is on the periodic table. Okay, so we find K. Here it is, right there, okay? Now, K is in group 1. So that means that it is a fixed charge. We don't need a Roman numeral. So we are just going to write potassium ion. However, if I gave you I don't know, lead 1, or Pb plus 1. Okay, so we find that one. So Pb, here it is. Okay, it is not in group 1, it is not in group 2, and it is not one of these special 6. Therefore, we are going to need to write lead 1 ion. You can kind of think of this almost like a last name because there's more than one of them, right? If I have, I don't know, 2 Colbys in one class, which I do this year, I need to be specific. I can't just say Colby because they won't know who I'm talking to. So you can't just say lead ion because there's more than one lead ion, okay? So always check, is it in group 1? Is it in group 2? Is it one of the special 6? If the answer is to yes, no parentheses, no Roman numeral. If it is any other positive element, then it's going to be, you need the Roman numeral in parentheses, okay? Okay. Okay, let's go back to your periodic table for a moment here. Usually, I don't start teaching the ions until like unit 6, or at least all of them, okay? And starting a little bit earlier. And so I want you to add something to your table that we'll be learning in a later unit, okay? So in between boron and aluminum, right here, we have what's called the staircase. So you're just going to kind of darken those down here, down here, down here, down here, and then it kind of stops here. Okay. I guess it could sort of go down further, but these are all radioactive elements in here. So in general, what I want you to know is that everything to the left of the staircase, okay, in general, are the positive elements. And the stuff to the right of the staircase, in general, are the negatives, okay? So there are obviously way more positives than there are negatives, okay? So now we're going to take a look at the negative elements. Now, the negative elements, they're all fixed, okay? There's no such thing. Every negative element has one charge, that's it. They never switch between them. Okay, so we name these in a different way. So these are the negative elements. Okay, and the naming rule for these is the name of the element, but "-ide ending. So you'll kind of take the stem, okay? So for example, chloride, okay? We don't call the ion chlorine, we call it chloride. Okay, so now the ones you're going to need to know are group 5A are -3, group 6A are -2, and group 7A are -1. Okay, then there are a few others that I want you to know. We have carbide is -4. Boride is -3. And hydride is -1. Okay, so let's look at the periodic table. You're going to write, so here's 5A, -3, -2, -1. Okay, and make sure you don't write it too big because we're going to be adding more stuff up here on top of it later, okay? And then actually what I would do as well is then right in here just put ides, okay? So -3, -2, -1, okay? Now notice that the staircase kind of goes through these. You don't have to worry about being asked what antimony is as a negative ion because it isn't one, right? But you don't need to worry about that because you would never be asked, okay? Okay, let's also put in those others. Stay in green here. Okay, so on carbon, we had carbon as +4. Well, it can also be -4, okay? So the carbon ion is C+4. The carbide is C-4, okay? And then boride, for boron, we said can be -3. And then hydrogen is usually +1, but it can also be -1, okay? So again, if you are given H-1, that's going to be hydride. But H+1 is going to be hydrogen, or the hydrogen ion, okay? So that's basically how you do these. If you're given Cl-1, then that's going to be chloride. Now, if you were given phosphide, you'd say, okay, that element is phosphorus. So I find it, here it is, right here. Okay, so that is -3, so P -3. Okay? Okay. Okay, so you are now going to do an ion worksheet 2A, okay, which has the positive ions, the elements, some fixed, some not fixed, ammonium, okay, which is the only one that's not an element so far, and then the negative ides, column 5, 6, and 7, as well as carbide, boride, and hydride. Okay, and I will announce when the quiz on these will be.